Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Ganai, Bikani, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations, as well as the Métis Nation, Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. This acknowledgement was brought to you by CalgaryFoundation.org. Now, back to the podcast. Hello. Things are recording, everybody. Bueno. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
I haven't even introduced you all yet. Come on now. Where's the form?
You said you were just going to hit record. I thought we were going for it.
Chaos episode.
Yeah, I was like, there is no structure.
Woo!
There is no structure. Sure.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey there.
Bonjour.
My name is Dean, and welcome back to the InkGuild podcast. Just go to fucking therapy.
If I develop Sims, delete the channel.
We need to start a revolution.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it.
All of them are fucking idiots.
25 is technically you.
Just say your morning routine.
And that's fucking it. Excuse me? Where my Grisha's at? Yo.
I'd like you to rephrase that, Simp.
Is my guilty boner. Like, you'll attract the kind of people that are into serial killers. That's still bigger than a city.
It's more than one planet.
Percy Jackson is Greek mythology fanfiction.
Boneless. Oh my god.
I no.
No.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the InkGuild podcast. I'm your host, Tyler. Dean died in a trial by combat recently, so it looks like you're stuck with me for now. Tonight we'll be talking about fictional languages and how to make them. I've got joining me Alex.
Hello.
Lee.
Hello.
And Marie-Soleil for the day.
Hello.
Alrighty. Intro out of the way. Hello, everybody. Today is going to be a bit of a weird structure as opposed to our regular episode. First off, we're going to be chatting a little bit about some fictional languages, and then we're going to set down to a step-by-step process in how to make them. I've developed a little worksheet and document that's going to be made free to anyone who wants it on Google Drive, and you can just follow through the steps and you'll get there eventually, is the hope. I do hope it's somewhat usable. But first off, talking about fictional languages. Who here's tried to write a fake language before for a book or something?
Oh, several.
I've done at least 7 or 8 before ever taking a course in linguistics or even trying to look it up. So yeah, same spot.
I have never been brave enough to try and create my own language, or invested enough, if I'm completely honest.
Invested enough, that is fair.
Yeah, I have several. And I have remade several when I learned new stuff. And then, that it's an ongoing process where I learn something new and I go, oh, I didn't know that. Let's restart.
Oh, so you've got a whole bunch of backlog languages you're going to be bringing to the session today, eh?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Good. Alrighty then. Let's talk about some. Well, actually, Marie-Soleil, have you ever tried to make a fake?
No, I have not. I hand wave away fake languages.
A reasonable response. Let's talk about some good ones then. Some ones that I hate to say actually exist, but kind of exist. So, like, everyone knows Tolkien's a language nut, right?
Yep.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, and this may have just been a meme, I think he started writing Elvish before he even thought of the plot to The Lord of the Rings, and someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But the man was...
I've heard the same.
Yeah. The man was a professor of, and again, don't quote me on this, either language, linguistics, or English in some form or fashion.
I'm pretty sure he was a linguist.
And didn't he also, like, literally write a good portion of the Oxford Dictionary?
Wouldn't surprise me.
So that's a hard bit of track to follow in, with someone that good being one of the biggest names in language making. But I digress. Has anyone ever actually taken a look at and tried to make something of Elvish or try to use it in daily life?
Nope.
I might be a nerd, but I'm not that big of a nerd.
So you're all telling me none of you have tried to make your name in High Elvish?
I actually haven't.
No.
I have
No.
That's fine. But yes, Elvish, and then I believe he also went and made a different dialect for the language of the orcs, and then one more for the dwarves. But again, I haven't made a study of Tolkien's language arts in a while. Another really interesting, notable one is Klingon for Star Trek. Now, I think I've said my opinion on Star Trek in the past, at least in our Star Wars episode, but very interesting thing to come out of a, nerdy TV show is basically a full language. I also don't know if anyone here has ever tried speaking Klingon.
I don't, but I have friends that are huge Star Trek nerds and probably speak at least know some of the words in it.
Lee, I know you come from old nerd blood. Was Klingon ever spoken in your household?
I was literally just staying silent, hoping you wouldn't bring it up. But yes. Yes. There has been Klingon spoken. But surprisingly, not necessarily, like, it was mainly like a summer camp thing, because I also went to nerdy kid camps. Like, I have a shameful nerdy past, but yes, I have spoken Klingon.
Well, I've never even attempted Klingon. However, Klingon has an interesting little aspect to it, which relates to what we're doing today. I'm going to talk for a moment about what makes a language. And these are rules you can look up. Some of them are debated. Like, a language needs to be reflexive if it's actually a language, meaning that it needs to be able to talk about itself within its own verbiage and lexicon. Another rule for languages is that the phonetics, the sounds that you're using to make words, have to be completely arbitrary, in that the symbol that represents them, the sound that it makes, is non-official per se. I shouldn't say non-official. Non-systematic is a better way to put it. Because when I say the word at doesn't sound like what at means. And one of the other big things that is required for a language, at least to be a living language, is it has to have people fluent in it. And there are definitely people fluent in Klingon, as there's probably at least one nerd fluent in Tolkien's Elvish. But there is one thing that makes Klingon very special, and it's one of the final rules for a language, being a living language, is it has to have native speakers, or at least one native speaker, meaning it's someone's first language, the first language they were taught when they were born. And Klingon has one native speaker, as far as I know. A nerdy couple who met at a TrekCon ended up getting married and having a kid, and the first language they taught this kid was Klingon.
Okay.
Wow.
That's a choice.
That's a hell of
that is a choice.
And like an interesting choice, to say the least. Not sure where that falls on like human rights violations and, like, you know, I wouldn't say endangering a child per se, but maybe neglect in a way.
Like, I support nerdy parenting, but that's a choice, I guess.
It's a little much.
Support bilingualism in the strangest way possible.
I do believe they also taught the child English very early on, so it's not
I
like the
hope.
kid, I'd hope they weren't developmentally deficient because of it. Because could you imagine poor, I don't even know a Klingon name, comes to school on its first day and then doesn't have a language in common with any of the other students?
Imagine being a teacher and a kindergarten student comes in speaking Klingon. I don't think I could handle it. I'd be like, cat, kid, cat.
Like, I've been in the situation where I've had kids in my class that don't speak English. They speak a different language, like another language. It's been a couple different times. But they do speak a language that a staff member at our center has been able to communicate with them in. I can't imagine if we couldn't.
Especially
I'm
one
just
that there's
thinking
no translators for, right? That's one of the big things, is where are you going to find a translator for this kid, if need be?
The internet. But no, I was thinking more because, like, I like to think I'd recognize Klingon if a kid came into my classroom speaking Klingon. And I don't know what I'd do, guys. I'd be like, okay. I'd think the kid was trolling me. I would not believe that the child's first language was Klingon.
Right. Especially if they had a Klingon name.
Even better if they were named something generic like Sunshine.
Not sure how generic Sunshine is, Lee, but...
Fair enough. Valid.
I digress. Yeah, Klingon, an interesting study in modern language. Other languages of note that I know have been fictionally created, Dothraki, for Game of Thrones, is an established fictional language. George R.R. Martin didn't make that, if I remember correctly. They hired someone specifically for the show.
So he could pretend to be even more Tolkien-like.
Yeah, right. And then Avatar, not the good one, the bad one with the blue people. They did hire a linguist to make the Na'vi language as well, which is a very interesting language in and of itself. But besides that, does anyone else have any fictional languages they know about that they want to quickly bring up for honorable mentions?
Atlantean. The language of Atlantis.
Isn't Gallifreyan also have like a written script?
Yep. It's a bunch of circles.
It looks cool.
It does.
Don't know how to begin reading it, but it looks cool.
I don't remember. In Atlantis, do they ever speak Atlantean at all?
Yes, they do. Miles speaks it with...
Kida?
Kida, yes. Miles and Kida speak it, and she speaks it with her father, and I believe you hear the people in the background speaking it. But they even have, like, the alphabet, like... It's got a script that's written out. No punctuation, though.
So she just showed me a picture of it, and that's very interesting and something I also want to talk about. If you want to look at the Atlantean script from the movie Atlantis, it falls into a trap, which happens with a lot of fictional linguistics. And I think all of us have looked through the player's handbook at least once or twice in this speaking group, so we all know that there's a section on languages. I think there's one in the DMG as well. And if you'll notice, it is just the English alphabet with different symbols.
Yep.
Which is a very cheap cheat to try and, create another language, per se. And something that I've fallen into the trap of before, and I've been told I'm not making another language, I'm just making a cryptogram. Which...
Yeah.
Pretty damn accurate. Before we move on, Lee, any fictional languages you want to bring up?
I was trying to think of actual fictional languages that I could think of, and I don't have any ones that are like would fall within languages how we defined them in the beginning of the episode. Yeah, no. I'm coming up with no actual language.
Fair. Well, let's move on to a little bit more discussion on language itself, and we can bring up the document now. I'm going to throw it up on screen for everyone, because this is what we're going to be looking at for most of the day. So this is the document I made. I'm putting it on my screen for anyone viewing the podcast right now. Comes with a bunch of rules or guidelines, as you would like to say, for creating a language. I use a lot of linguistics terms in here because I have taken several courses in linguistics, almost enough to get a degree, but I decided business was probably going to pay me more, so I went with that instead. A lot less fun, I'll be honest. So, moving on to languages and making them. I have made a few using these rules. The last one I made was a while ago, and that was before I properly codified these rules. So just bear in mind, I did create an example language, which I will be referencing and pulling up, and I believe they should be in the drive for everyone to access and take a look at. The scans of the worksheet are not very good. I was writing in pencil, and you'll see how trash my actual writing is. That being said, let's get down to it. So, we are going to be creating languages based on simple rules and guidelines that can be extrapolated onto basically a full dictionary's worth of words and sentences. We're not going to be creating a full dictionary's worth of words and sentences because that's going to take forever. And we don't have that in the scope of the podcast. But what I'm hoping is that by the end of this, everyone will have a set of rules that is workable with which to create as many words and sentences as they desire. And an important thing to note, all words are made up. Meaning if you don't have a word for something in your language, you can make it up with these rules. There's a lot of extra that can be added in to any language. It's really up to you all the extra tidbits and bobs you want to throw into it. Obviously, the languages we have in the real world are very good examples of interesting rules and things that you can supplement in to add depth and creativity into a language. Same with the symbology of the written language and the format of structures and semantics and things that you'd like. All of this can be changed and is mutable. I don't address every possible rule in this worksheet because if we were to go through that again, it would take a long time. I do include a couple niche examples for fun, and it kind of becomes your playground after you get the basics done. So, with that being said, we should move on to step 1, everybody, which is choose your sounds. I have posted a link with this in the Word document, which leads you to the IPA, or the International Phonetic Alphabet. This is something developed by linguists to be able to categorize sounds. And almost any sound that a human can make with their mouth or throat is displayed in the International Phonetic Alphabet. The one I've linked also allows you to click on them so that you can hear the sounds, the way they're pronounced. I agree with most of the pronunciations given in this version of the International Phonetic Alphabet. I have heard various interpretations depending, and it also depends on speaker and accent, obviously. So, with that being said, we're going to take a few moments and just chat. Everyone go into your IPA chart there and start. I've got a column for consonants and a column for vowels where you can post your little sound bites just draw them in. If you want a W sound, put a W, a T sound, put a T, etc., in your IPAs. And everyone let me know when you're done and we can chat.
I went through and listened to them earlier, and I know it's just a thing, but some of them are really hard to tell apart.
Yeah, especially in a few of the vowels, which is why I said I agree with most of the pronunciations to symbols on the chart, not all.
It was a lot of the ones in the fricative row that I found sounded really similar, I think.
Yeah. That they can. There's various schools of linguistics, and it all depends on who listened to the sound and who decided that their tongue was placed this much to the left instead of right while making this sound. I tend to shy away from fricatives when I'm making my own language, I'll be honest, just because as a primarily English speaker, even if you make your own language, you're kind of going to be speaking it with an English accent, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And feel free to group sounds together. In my examples, if you look at the step 1 PDF that I've got posted there, you'll see I have multiple sounds associated with one symbol. English does not care what symbol is used to make what sound. English does not give two shits. English will throw things together. A lot of other languages will too. English isn't the only one that's got a problem with this, but English is pretty bad, and its examples are very common. Like the word rough, which, is an RUF sound, even though it is spelled nothing like that.
Well, I mean, the R's there. There's also technically a U in there.
Technically. You are right. But a GH making an F sound, it only makes sense culturally. Which, another interesting thing to talk about when creating a fictional language is if you're creating this for a specific culture or racial language, for Dungeons and Dragons or novelization or something like that, you can definitely think culturally what sounds would apply, what would go where. And culture is something I do like to talk about when creating your own language, because it affects so much of what we view linguistically. It affects our writing styles. It affects what words are seen as, highbrow as opposed to low class. So if you're writing for a culture or language, do keep it in a culture or race. Do keep it in mind when picking sounds and making words. I also recommend, I think I put it in the sheet, pick a few vowels and then quite a few consonants. I think I left space for 10 of each. So feel free to pick a couple, because you're gonna use them more than likely.
I think I'm good.
Alright, I'll just get the sound picked out. Lee, how you doing?
I'm good.
You got two things picked out?
Yep.
I think Marie-Soleil is lagging behind the limit, so give her a second, but of course if you want to start reading on the step 2 before I explain it, feel free.
My language is going to sound so ugly, I'm so ready.
So, just to clarify, I specifically made it to be as, simple that way as possible. Well, that is fine. Real world languages, like I said, none of the sounds match any of the symbols, and it's all made up. So it only sounds good because people have been speaking it for thousands of years, right? Doesn't sound good if we were to take it in a vacuum.
I think there are some languages that flow together in sounds that make more sense together.
I'm sure there's a scientific method we could use to prove or disprove, but for me, it's eye of the beholder, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
And
Like, I'm also not going to think that too hard about making up a language, quite frankly.
fair. But it is an interesting thing to think about, right? Is like, if you're choosing a lot of harsh and guttural sounds and consonants and vowels, what are the people like that speak this language, right?
Isn't there a thing about languages reflecting the like landscape they were formed in? Like people that live on like flatter areas tend to have similar sounds to other people on flatter areas versus like in mountainous regions.
Yeah, I don't remember what that theorem is called. I don't reference it in this document specifically, but again, it's language is all cultural, right? So you can totally create based on those principles for fictional use or D&D or however. If you want your draconic language to relate to your infernal language, to reference to specifically off the player's handbook, you can totally make a cultural and historical reason why those two would be similar, besides just the fact that they have guttural sounds and are spoken by things that could probably kill a level 1 in one hit. Marie-Soleil's gonna keep picking her sounds, so she said we can move on. So we'll get on to what I picked. So my example language is up on screen. I have not named this language, by the way, so I'll have to come up with one while we're working. I picked only 7 sounds. I picked the w, b, t, e, a, and o. I picked a few weird ones in this one, namely the tongue click, which I'm just denoting with an exclamation point in IPA. I wanted to use that for something a little special, which we'll get into a bit later. I also picked the O sound, which is not listed on this IPA chart because it is a diphthong, is the full name for it, which is a sound composed of a combination of two. And we often think of O as, one letter in English, the little circle. But in truth, when we say it, we always say it with a bit of that rounded W at the end. And as such, the O symbol itself on the IPA chart makes it a completely different sound than we normally expect. But if you want to get that full O vowel, symbology-wise, it would be an OW. So I'm using that one just to throw in a little bit of fun. Moving on to symbology, which is very, very fun to draw up a language. Alex, you've done some work in language before. Did you have a set of symbols picked out to bring to this design class?
So I have several languages kind of in the works, but there's one whose symbols I've never been able to make myself happy with, so I'm reworking on that one.
Fair. Lee, how's your symbology? What are you working with?
I basically decided that if there are letters, they had to be easy to form quickly for writing. So essentially what I'm doing is circles, modified circles. Like all my vowels I've decided are circles with a dot in some form, and all of my consonants are a circle without dots and some other, with a modification to shape or an addition.
Cool. I like it. I chose very simply. I have a circle, a triangle, a square, a diamond, and an X. I chose the buttons on the nearest thing I could find, which was my PS4 controller. And I'm working it into usable is a tough sell, but I'm working it into this example language. It should be noted that you never have to have a written alphabet for a language. Languages can be entirely oral if you so choose. But if we're, say, handing out a Dungeons and Dragons puzzle, it's really cool to hand out a bunch of symbols that your players can't read and then have them figure out something in a language you produced. It's fucking fantastic. But there was one line I would like to bring out that I did right. And this is a stolen quote, though I'm not sure exactly from where. Any language can be oral without any written component. This is because the ability to produce speech is an innate human capability, whereas written language is a cultural invention. And this again goes back to, well, what are you making this language for, right? What would their symbology look like? Would they need to write it down quickly, so it'd be a couple quick scratches in dirt here and there? Or is it more elegant? Yeah, symbology can be hard because it is bringing in like an outside discipline into the matter, and that is of, artistic cohesion and to some extent visual arts design. I will say I am not good with visual arts design and artistic cohesion. We'll see.
Could some of the fact that it doesn't look elegant the way you want it to be the fact that it's like your own language too? Because generally we consider things elegant if they kind of fit a mode and model that we're familiar with, right? So if you're making something up for the first time, chances are it's not going to look elegant to you necessarily.
I suppose that's true.
Yeah, that tracks. I've tried to make languages that look elegant to me, and I ended up kind of just pseudo-copying languages that I found interesting, or at least their symbology. Specifically, a lot of Eastern languages. I always find their look entrancing and very interesting, the way they form sentences and things. And I suppose this is a good point to note. We are going to be getting into sentence structure a little while later, but if you want your language to follow non-Western written rules, that is perfectly allowed. English and a lot of Western languages are written. Oh, that was bad. Written left to right, and then down a line left to right. You do not have to follow that. You can write right to left. You can write center downwards to top left, to top right, to bottom left, to center right, and follow whatever pattern you so please. As long as you can replicate it and you can write down these rules, then you can follow whatever pattern you like. You can write straight vertical. You could have words be different symbols all piled on top of each other. Your playground with how your language forms its sentences in that way. And again, can be cultural. How goes the symbology all intended?
It goes well. I think I'm done. I am not done.
No worries, take your time. I knew this one was going to be a weird one for being the edit anyway. Lots of silence for the fun. I do hope everyone is enjoying this, though. I find this stuff supremely interesting.
This feels like normal world building. Like, oh look, this is something I have to get done, and now I'm doing it with other people. Huzzah!
Productivity chat on podcast? Why not?
I was reading ahead a little bit, and we were talking about, like, because we're writing symbols to donate different words, right? And then we're figuring out from the symbols that we assigned them how they sound, and blending them together from the individual phenomes is going to be a struggle, I think, for me.
Yeah, in the putting them together in patterns, constant vowel and stuff like that. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, because like I think I'll do CVC because it's my easiest. It's just, like, I'm not good at sounding out English words, if I'm completely honest. Like, my phonomical awareness is not where it should be. So, like, throwing on new sounds is going to be an interesting experience.
I see. I get what you're putting down.
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle. I accept it, though.
You find you end up reusing a lot of the same symbols to some extent?
A little bit, yeah.
So then, like, what I did for that is, like, I kind of did what English does, where, because, like, a P, a B, a D, and a Q are all the same. So, like, if you have a symbol you really like, just invert that fucker.
I mean, I've been doing that.
Oh, okay, that's valid. I don't know how else to help you then.
I appreciate the thought, though.
I love Lee's strategy. Rotate it. Flip it. All right, bop it. Twist it.
You laugh, but that's literally what I did for vowels.
It works. It works. An interesting note, while we're talking about symbology, cursive is wild.
I love cursive.
I've forgotten 99% of cursive because it is so unnecessary for a language to have two written forms like that. But we did it.
I mean, something else we haven't even talked about is, like, capital letters versus, like, lowercase letters.
Yep. And to be honest, it's just one of those extra rules. We don't need them. We don't even truthfully need punctuation in written languages if your speaker inherently knows enough of the language, or if you place lines in certain ways in writing, you can do without punctuation. And if you'll notice, in English speaking, we don't even speak punctuation. You can tell when I'd be using, say, a comma, a period, or a question mark. But orally, we don't need them. We don't say punctuation, per se. Like I said, English just threw on a bunch of rules for fun at one point in time. Capital letters, capitalizing names, for what? So we can respect the person?
For the Bible.
For the Bible. True. That had a lot of linguistic significance on English. Way too much.
Yeah, for written English, it had a huge impact, right? Because for a while, it was the only well-circulated book that was available in English. Because the rest of them were grimoires, or books written in Latin, right? So things that happened in the Bible, like capitalizing important things such as God, or Abraham, or important characters, eventually kind of just smooshed their way into the language.
Which, again, very culturally interesting. And if it's something you want to try and include in a language, by all means. It just, every rule you tack onto a language makes it both more complex, but also to some extent deeper and more interesting. Though again, depending on your usage of it, like if you're handing out a puzzle to a D&D group, as simple as possible is better. Because the regular D&D party can't solve a puzzle for 4-year-olds. So, like,
To be fair, I think some of that is like the lack of visual or tactile medium. Because sometimes I swear if there's just a visual, things look better.
That is true.
So what you're saying is I should hand out a Rubik's Cube for my next puzzle.
No, because
Rubik's Cubes are
terrible at Rubik's Cubes. And I will just take it apart and put it back together because that's who I am as a person.
I like the chorus of protests to the Rubik's Cube.
I mean, one time...
Come on, man.
That would be good. One time I did a block puzzle Like I had like, you know, that game Rush Hour. I set up the hardest puzzle on there and I just gave it to them and I was like, go for it.
I have a Rubik's Cube with numbers on it. It's like a Sudoku Rubik's Cube. It's weird.
Nice.
I've heard of those. They sound awful.
I think the best puzzle I've given a D&D group was one I gave my family. And like one of them's Snurfeblin. And I know you're about to correct my pronunciation, Tyler, but
on my
no.
languages episode, you mispronounce it. On my languages episode. Damn you, Lee.
Yes, I do what I want. But so I made them know certain cave signs, and then I wrote them out for them, and I told them what they meant, and then they had to try and match the cave signs with like something similar, and it took them forever, but like they got it because I honestly thought it would be a simple little puzzle. It was not.
They never are.
But while we're on we'll say we move past puzzles and stuff. We got D&D to cover next week. I think Marie-Soleil is taking a break at the moment, so I'm going to go over my language quickly while we wait. So I already stated the symbols I would be using, just circle, triangle, square, diamond, and X. I did include 2 special rules at the bottom of the page. My circle, which is normally a B sound, becomes a W at the beginning of a word before a square, just because I wanted to add some complexity. And my square, which is normally an O sound, becomes an I at the beginning of a word. So if there's ever a square at the beginning of a word, it has to make the I sound, not the O sound. Why did I do this? No tangential reason, just showing off the fact of the different sound changing rules you can do.
So like I could do I before E except after C in my own language to haunt me and break its own rule multiple times?
100%.
Yeah, thanks. I hate it. No thank you.
However, that's more a written rule and less an oral rule. Mine are specifically oral rules.
Valid.
Because writing is hard. English writing makes no sense. And I basically have to turn off the part of my brain that's linguist to write anything, which is great. It's fine. It's whatever. But like, once I learn some of these theories and things, it's hard to suppress them.
Okay, I think I'm good.
Got something workable down?
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested to see your symbology, I'll be honest. The way you talk about it, I think it's gonna look good. Lee just showed me hers, and it looks pretty dope. I do like the use of circles. Circles are pretty.
Thank you. I figured I would just go with a theme.
Hey, that's a way to do it. I remember I made a draconic language a while back, which was like, I don't know what design I was going for, but it ended up looking like really postmodern, but for a language. I don't know how to explain it. If I have the old notes somewhere, I'll look them up and post them, but I couldn't find them in a customary search. Alrighty, so with all the symbols down and with the associated sounds, we're going to move on to step 3. And step 3 is not a hard step, but it is a very important one. And step 3 is your internal word structure. There are 2 main internal word structures: consonant vowel consonant, or CVC, and vowel consonant vowel, or VCV. And that simply alludes to, obviously, the placement of vowels and consonants within a word. There are more complex structures, such as consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, and consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, respectively. But they kind of fall back onto the rules of CVC and VCV. I recommend picking one and sticking with it, but this is more a general guideline than a hard and fast rule. English hits every one of these points. VCV, CVC, all of them. There's a word in English that matches every single one of these. But in general, you'd find that English is a CVC language, typically with a consonant followed by vowel followed by consonant in its internal word structure. I, for my language, chose both, in that pronouns in my language will follow VCV, but literally everything else will follow CVC. And to speakers of my language, that is how you determine and differentiate pronouns within the spoken word and written language as opposed to anything else in the written language. You can divide it up and say, all right, nouns and pronouns and verbs are all going to be VCV, prepositions, directionals, and tenses are all going to be CVC, whatever you so choose. They all work, and like I said, it's more a guideline than a concrete rule. Let me know when you're done picking your choices there, and we'll move on.
I'm good to go.
Sorry, I was pulling up documents to see what I already have.
Fair. Which one did you end up going with, Lee?
I think VCV is going to be my nouns, and CVC is going to be everything else.
Sounds good.
Yeah, just because VCV words hurt me. So, like, they only get to be one thing. Yeah, exactly. This is how you tempt me to leave. Psychic damage.
Psychic damage.
CVC is the way to go, man.
Hey now. We are not elitist linguists in here.
You're not.
All languages are good and valid, Lee. Every single
All languages are good and valid, but like...
including the ones that use VCV.
I'm not saying it as a general statement about languages. I'm saying it more like when you're teaching people how to read, CVC is a lot easier to teach people how to read with than VCV. I don't know why, but people grasp it a lot more easily. And that's where I'm coming from, in English.
Ooh, I can kind of answer this. So that's interesting that you brought that up, because you have a very specific teaching background, especially in teaching language. I think a big part of the difference is in English, a lot of our vowels are actually very similar, mouth shape wise, and as such, sound wise, right? Like ah and o, not that different if you look at the internal structure of the mouth.
That's valid. I'm just saying, CVC, man. Easier to teach, and thus are my favorite. But you're completely correct, because vowels in English are all so round and gooey.
They involve a lot of lips. A lot of English involves a lot of lips. We don't use a lot of the back of the throat. Like, I don't remember. It's in the IPA chart, but I'm not going to bother looking it up. There's a French vowel that is using your glottis, which is kind of the... how do I explain this? The top part of the back of your throat, you close it, and it sort of makes that almost guttural GH sound you will sometimes hear in French. The grr.
Yeah,
comes from the back of the throat.
This is why French is really hard to speak. We don't have sounds like that in English.
It's also the way words are organized in the French language. Like a sentence structure is very different from the English sentence structure in French.
She is right. Sentence structures are next step. One of the next steps. Yeah, English, for it being the supposed lingua franca, actually isn't that cool with a lot of the sounds that can be made. And this is coming now from a more prescriptive as mine said, I love a lot of the sounds a human mouth can make. Why doesn't English trill its R's? Trilled R's sounds
Right?
so nice.
I love trilled R's.
I love the sound of them. Cannot do them to save my life.
Yeah, I can't do them. I fucking... Oh my god.
Like, I sound like an angry dog, and that is as close as I get.
That was a chihuahua, Lee.
Thank you.
I loved it.
Thank you. Like I said, an angry dog. I try my best. Yeah, that's all I get.
Yeah, I think I'm good to move on as well.
Alrighty. So moving on from word structure down to step 4. I was right. It is sentence structure. Sentence structure can be a lot harder and a lot more interesting. And I'll explain why. So the main parts of a sentence, and this is generalizing, are a subject, a verb, and an object. They can be switched into literally any order. And they're obviously denoted easy, just like the past step, by the first letter. So subject, verb, object is SVO, whereas a verb, subject, object language would be a VSO. And I'll give an example. In English, it's mostly, again, I use mostly because English doesn't care about rules very often, but it is mostly in SVO languages, and it forms sentences like, Sam ate oranges. Whereas in a verb, subject, object, or VSO language, it would be, ate Sam oranges. Which makes no sense to an English speaker, because our subject cannot be placed in such a way. But it doesn't make the sentence any less valid. If a speaker fluent in the language understands intrinsically that the subject always comes before the object and the verb at the beginning of the sentence is the subject acting upon the object, then they will understand the sentence perfectly fine. I recommend one of these two types to go base your language off of, just because they're easier. I'm sticking with SVO for mine because it's a example language, so I don't need to go any crazier with it. This, I will say, is often the hardest part, because referencing back to this rule, as someone who is a native English speaker, it's really hard for me to move things around within a sentence easily. And I've tried it in the past with languages, writing, say, a verb, object, subject language I did at one point in time, and I found myself accidentally switching back to SVO constantly.
This is the hardest part of learning a new language as well, I've found.
Yeah.
I'm like I started learning Japanese for a while, and like it's the individual words and stuff I was fine with, and then as soon as it got to sentences, I could not figure out what order to put them in.
Yeah, it's a different one. Also can kind of come culturally, depending on what matters culture-wise. Does the verb matter the most? Then it's probably at the beginning of the sentence. Does the subject matter the most? It's probably at the beginning of the sentence, right? I do not know what word order Japanese is in, however. Could not tell you. I'm sure I learned it at one point, but meh.
And again, you can switch it up here. I just did remember a little tease I did. I didn't do it for this language. Didn't do it. Oof. The more I speak about linguistics, the worse my English is getting. Someone help. If you want to form, say, questions by changing your sentence structure, that is also allowed. You can have the entire language SVO, but every time someone asks a question, you turn to SOV. Could create a very interesting language structure regardless, and could make speakers, again, intrinsically aware of when someone is asking a question.
That'd be a good way to not have to deal with punctuation.
Yeah. They're a trick. Like I said, this is as complex as you want to make it. Really, really open.
SVOs all around then?
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna mess around with anything else at this time.
That is fair. That is
Apparently, Japanese is an SOV also.
verb coming at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
I speak literally none. I watch anime dubbed because I am a heathen. All right.
At least you admit it.
I fully admit it. I do not want to be reading subtitles while I watch. I know. I'm a sinner. Moving on, however, in steps to one of the most interesting parts, and that is creating a lexicon, or to some extent a small dictionary. A true lexicon is the entire vocabulary of a given language. We don't have the time to write that, as I said at the beginning. If you want to take the free time to try and go through the Oxford or Webster's dictionary and just write out every word in your own language, feel free. It can be very fun. However, I don't think Dean wants to edit that. And I don't want to send him too many hours of silence in this recording. So, Dean's dead. Never mind. Dean died. As such, I have given out, or you can write down on scrap, a list of some general words you should probably include in your language. There is a section to show the symbology and the symbolified written language. There's also a spot for pronunciation, and you should probably go through and get most of these. Some of them are cultural, such as using gendered terms, he, him, she, her. Not necessary in a language. I put them there as placeholder. You do not have to have those. If you want, you can. You can also use non-gendereds and the like for all of it. I don't actually know how to create a gendered language, such as, say, Spanish. I'm not sure how it's done, and I kind of refuse to do so because even though I'm not a language elitist, I think that's archaic, but that is also just me.
It's not just you.
It's not just me. Good. I've written a few notes on this list, so I'm just going to go through them, and for anybody listening and for those present. Here is where a lot of the creativity can take off, and we may spend quite a bit of silence on this one. The hardest parts are going to be things like your adverbs and your tenses, punctuations, and prepositionals. One way to get around it is by including the use of inflection and suffix and prefixes. I will quickly talk about my language in that regard. So in mine, my adverbs, I only included two, the most and the least. So your maximal and your minimal adverbs. So if we say someone ran very fast in English, that is your maximum run, right? In my language, you would just take walk and then add the maximal to get run. And as such, the most is no longer, say, very fast, two adverbs to add on to run. It is simply one suffix that is added on to walk. You can do it that way. You can create separate words specifically, or you can do inflection for various things. Inflection, the easiest way to describe it is in English. If we're asking a question, the last syllable or two of the sentence you're saying is raised in pitch. That is about the only true use of inflection in English when it comes to hard rules. Otherwise, everything inflection-wise in English is emotional and tonal, in that you can tell how I'm feeling by the intonation I'm using and inflection I'm using. But there are some languages where it is very important, and the relative pitch of one syllable to another can mean an entirely different word. And I believe the best example of this is, someone help me, is it Cantonese or Mandarin that uses a lot of inflection? I want to say Cantonese.
I would not know.
Someone
couldn't tell you.
Someone yell at me later if I'm wrong. But in Cantonese, you could have a word like ma, ma, and ma, which would be 3 different words, despite using the exact 2 same phonemes to make the word up. And as such, inflection, you can just write a little note if you want to use it. I'm being very simple, and in my language, questions are asked the same way they're asked in English, which is raising of inflection in the last syllable. You don't have to do that. You can do that. I've put a spot for punctuation in here because you can speak punctuation, but you don't have to speak punctuation. So again, this is your playground. Try and come up with as many of these words as you can, or as many of them as you want to. It is also cultural. So if your language, let's say, again, I'll use mine as an example. My language doesn't have a specific word for smell. Instead, it has a word for hear. And how you talk about smell is you would say in an English translation, hear with your nose. Because that's how they determined smell. Hearing was more important to whatever culture this was, and as such, since smell was kind of unimportant, there's not a specific word for it. But you have to use an aggregate of an explanation of a couple different words to get to smell. Unnecessarily complicated? Yes, but it is an example of one of many tricks you can pull in this regard. Any questions before we get into a period of silence here?
I think I've got some ideas figured.
I realized I should probably be asking more if you all have questions. I'm being a bad host. It's fine. Dean's dead. I'm here forever. Yeah.
Can't wait for him to edit this.
What do you mean? He's dead. I'm going to summon up his spirit to fix all of this up for me and make it presentable.
Yeah. I mean, he can edit it from the afterlife. That's fine.
Yeah, no one.
Necromancy for editing.
Yeah, nothing says you can't. You can totally edit when you're dead. Isn't that right, Dean? All right. Enough threatening a ghost. I'm gonna hit a pause on this recording, and we can get some work done.
Which sounds you didn't grab at the beginning?
Yeah, as I'm going through trying to make up words, I'm just like, oh, I didn't grab that sound, so I don't have a letter for it.
Oh, okay. Well, remember, you can always use a symbol to represent multiple sounds, and there doesn't even have to be a rule for it, truthfully. It's like sometimes it makes this sound. But if you want to come up with more symbols, also fun. Either way.
So I've decided I was just writing the words and symbology first, and then I'll figure out how they sound, and this is going to be a nightmare, my friend.
A nightmare?
Yeah.
In reading? In how to
reading it. Reading it
is gonna be a experience for me.
Good to hear. I will say, in writing, we do in the spot we have where I make everyone write out a sentence, I leave a spot for pronunciation, so you can just write the pronunciation right underneath it, so you can just read off the pronunciation. It's a lot easier.
Oh, that's 100% what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. And that is a recommendation in general. If you're trying to write in one of these languages, leave space to write the pronunciation as well. It's a lot easier when making it, and that way you don't have to be fluent, like some people, in your own language.
Just call me out, damn.
I'm very impressed with it, I'll be entirely honest. But you don't have to be.
I'm just good at that kind of stuff. I have a good memory for it.
I have a wonderful memory for music lyrics. It takes up 90% of my brain in processing power. The other 10% is memes, probably. If I could become a meme historian, I would. Interesting point of fact, and something I thought of doing as a joke for this session. Instead of creating symbols for each of my letters, I was just going to take GIFs off the internet and make each one of them associate to a sound. So that way a sentence in my language would just be a string of copy-pasta memes.
I love the idea of that.
Perfectly valid, and it would entirely work.
That would, it would take forever to get through a sentence, though. Is this the modern equivalent of, Entish?
Yes, that is all Ents do. PowerPoint of memes.
We joke, but it could be entirely viable, especially with today's modern technology. If you just have a symbols dictionary hooked up to your Word document, and you have keybinds relating to each different, meme that therefore corresponds to symbol, you could type in it pretty proficiently. Would anyone want to? I kinda do now, I'll be honest. Am I going to? We'll see how much free time I have later.
I was about to say, I think it would be cool to do it once as a joke and then just never think about it again.
It'd be like that one document everyone wrote in elementary school in wingdings just to annoy their teachers.
Ah, yes, wingdings. I forgot about wingdings. What a weird little cryptogram. Why does Word still include that in their potential fonts? What is it ever been used for?
Aren't there 4 of them too?
There's multiple variations of wingding, yes. And I don't know where they come from. They've just always been there, and I've never bothered to look it up.
Who invented wingdings? Charles Bigelow and Chris Holmes, apparently.
Why, though?
Yeah, who, but I'm at the why. The why is very
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Blah, blah, blah. It seems as bizarre as it is ubiquitous. What is wingdings thinking? Why would someone want to write a comma using a mailbox? Boop. So they were husband and wife, apparently. They also designed the font Lucida.
It's an okay font as fonts go.
They were proteges of legendary designer Hermann Zapf, whose own Zapf Dingbats font, another collection of odd symbols, broke ground when it was distributed with Apple printers in the mid-1980s.
Are they just trolling? Did they just make these for fun? And we're like, fuck it.
I'm looking for answers, but I'm not seeing any.
The answer's written in wingdings.
No one will know the true answer.
It was included in a beta test of Windows in 1990.
Damn it, wingdings are older than I am. Shit.
Yep.
It'd be really messed up. And I think I could totally do this if you set someone's font for their entire operating system to wingdings.
Oh, that'd be evil.
That'd be pretty cruel.
Okay, are you gonna tell us why they made them though?
I don't think they even know why they made them.
Let's call it drugs. They were on their computer with drugs, and the computer was also on drugs, and wingdings were made.
This can be edited out. It's fine. I don't even know if we're recording right now.
We are.
Okay, there we go.
Wingding chat is important to the episode.
Well, I couldn't find the answer as to where it came from, so.
It's okay. We got to leave the viewers.
Or like why it was invented. Google it yourselves.
Google it yourselves.
Sorry, search it yourselves. Fuck Google.
Firefox it yourselves.
Bing it doesn't work. Nope, can't do it.
Go Yahoo yourself. What do you mean some languages were written on lines? I don't know an example.
I'm trying to remember. It's not that one. Like Hindi. Like it's all lines and then like the symbols are like.
I can't think of an example of Hindi in my head, but I'll take your word on it. I may look up an
where all the letters kind of flow together in one line and like stand up, and then flow together at the bottom.
Just showed me an example. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like that, but like vertically instead.
I get what you're putting down. That makes sense. And again, like artistic wise and choice wise, totally your playground. I think that would look very interesting. I know I did a vertical language for one of my first ones following this rule set after I pieced it together, and this is a couple years back now. And I did vertical lines with dots and branches off of them. And I made mostly simple oral rules to follow, but I made my written rules really complex in that each letter needed to connect to the previous one through a branch of some form or fashion, and whether it connected on the left or right side of the letter decided whether it was a vowel or not. So you'd have vowels that were the same symbols as consonants, but because it appeared on the right side of the preceding letter, it would therefore change the sound you made. And though it ended up looking like a very pretty language, it took me forever to compose a single sentence in it because I had to keep reading my page and a half of rules on how to make words again. Super fun, super unnecessary, but that's most of my life, so
Yeah, well, I have my one language that I've been working on the longest, and it's like at the point where I like know the characters well enough to know what like sound they represent, so I can just read it most of the time.
That's fantastic and super fun.
Like, I can barely do that with English. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I will say, and this is just like slight word of warning as someone who's done work with this style of making languages before, the reason I say choose quite a few consonants and vowels is to keep words from becoming too samey. And there's nothing wrong with having two words that sound the same but mean entirely different things depending on context. English has it all the time. It just makes your job as a writer and user a little bit easier if you don't have to rely on that type of context clue. But again, it can also be really fun for a puzzle if that context clue fucks your players over. So like, you do you. This brings me to an interesting example, actually. Speaking on sameness in a language, when I speak any of the words in my language, you're all gonna hate it. I promise you this. Every word sounds very similar to the one before it, just because of how few sounds I chose for this one. But a language that does this really well is, and I don't remember the cultural name for it, but Indigenous Hawaiian, I think, and again, I haven't looked back at my old lectures, it has the least vowels of any currently living spoken language. I think they've got 3 or 4 vowel sounds that they use. But Indigenous Hawaiian is a very pretty language that flows very well because of it. And just goes to show that, like, how you use your vowels and stuff like that, even if you've only got a couple, can still make a full-fledged language. There's no one saying you have to use 10 vowel sounds and 10 consonants or all that, but you can still very much have a workable and very good language. Not to say any language is bad. I'm talking in circles. Indigenous Hawaiian.
Okay.
Very interesting study in language.
It's okay, you can say English is a bad language.
It's not really, though. Like, culture-wise, it's super interesting how all the different forms came about. It's basically a really fucked up Creole language that got too big for its britches.
Yeah, it's interesting to learn about, but also, like, some of the things that we have as a result of that are really stupid.
Are so stupid and so silly, but almost every English speaker knows intrinsically the rules that apply to them, which just is so cool to me. And the fact that we can, you know, pick out new rules generationally, like, if I said that's lit AF, generationally, it would entirely change what that meant. Right? And never before in a period of time have we had such a dissonance between internal language gaps, between speakers of the exact same dialect of language that would know or not understand what the hell was going on with that simple phrase. Obviously, mass media contributes to this a lot. And the availability of language to everyone changes all of this. But I digress. English is also an interesting case study. I'm not going to say it's bad, just extremely interesting.
Sure is interesting.
Hold on, I'm going to pronounce. So we have a few listeners in on this episode, and one of them just posted... Firstly, all my homies hate English. Yeah, I'm calling you out. I know you're listening. And then the second sentence, which I wish to utter as best as possible. Ye axe, my camarade, are lit AF fam squad. Just to throw in a mix of good old English and modern slang. All right, now that we've worked on some lexicon fun, I like if everyone shared a word or two, just so we can get a sense of how your language sounds. And I can definitely start. So my easiest words to say are my affirmative and my negative, which are singularly just a single sound. So you can say yes or no with one utterance. And real simple, yes is ah and no is oh. Done. Easy peasy. One of my others, once I pull up my lexicon here, let's go with walk, which is tot. Speak, wot. I/me is et. Non-gendered they, them is eb. So you see how I'm saying with, you know, a limited number of vowels and consonants, a lot of my stuff starts to sound the same. how's yours sounding? Like, care to give us a few reads?
Mine sounds a bit ridiculous, and I'm not sure how much of the ridiculousness is me just not being able to translate the sound from the international phonic things to actual like things that I'd remember. But walk is Urasha. Speak is Lasha. What else is a good one? Ooh, I like the pronouns I did because I is they, them, multiple or general is z. They, them, for both female and male, referring to a singular person, is z. Not z. The, because I can't remember my own language, and us, we, is w. So I made them all have the exact same vowel in them, which I didn't use in any other form.
Yeah. And that's a very good, trick to make speakers or non-speakers realize that, hey, these are pronouns. I also see you use a few fricatives in there, and fricatives are very fun.
So for my peasant being who doesn't know what a fricative is, do you want to explain that?
V. Any of those sounds that vibrate a lot, and you can hold them for an indefinite length of time.
Nice, okay.
For as long as
I did end up using a lot of those.
Well, they're good.
You are correct.
And the way your language like flows together, like it seems to be making sense intrinsically.
Hopefully.
Alex, care to rattle off a few for us?
Sure. For I, me, I did ser, which little historic or like world building context, I guess. The letter Z, or like the equivalent of the letter Z, like the Z sound is considered extremely like important in this culture. So I just figured they would use it to refer to themselves. And then us, we also uses it, and the word for that is Zul.
Nice. I like the cultural implications already.
Yeah. And then for yes, no, yes is cheek, and no is what letter is that? Hold on. Rouge.
I'm noticing a lot of that je fricative here and there.
I like it.
It is. It's a good one. It's a weird one because we don't actually see it in English a lot. One of the main words the most common word we'll hear that in is in judge, in which it comes in at that weird spot at the end. But it is a nice one. It's got a weird, almost warm sound to it. And I'm pretty sure it's not even a fricative. I think it's called an affricate because it is partially a fricative and partially not. So very interesting sounds.
I also like how flowy your language sounds. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, no, the je sound, I tend to use it a lot when I'm trying to come up with words. I don't know why. I'm just very drawn to it.
Hey, that works. Maybe you can come up with a cultural region. There we go. Woo!
The further we do this, the longer we do this, the more you forget English. It's kind of great.
It's great. I love it. Fuck English. Let's speak whatever we make. So one thing you mentioned, Lee, in using the same vowel sound, that is something I do a lot as well. And I will do it in opposites. So let's take my gendered female specific singular, my she her is ibo, whereas the he him counterpart is iba. In that it is the first same syllable at the beginning, I simply change the vowel at the end. And what I'm doing a lot of, and I do focus in on that specifically in this language, so as many words sound different from others as possible, because I knew it was going to be samey, is called finding, I believe it's minimal pairs. And what that means is two words that sound or look similar, but there is one key point in the word that changes the definition to a native speaker, right? And that's an important denotation to look at because, as I said before, you can have two words that sound exactly the same in a sentence, and then it's the context that changes the meaning. But it can also be even a single sound if they're sounding similar. But all sounding good. Let's move on to our sixth and final part here, which is creating one full sentence within our own vernacular language here. So you've got your set of rules for word making, and you've got what should be most of the words listed in the sentence. You may have to come up with one or two off the cuff to make this. You've got your sentence structure, internal word structure, symbology, and pronunciation. You've got all the tools you need. And I have the example sentence, I ran to the store, which is in an SVO, obviously in English. Broken down, it is going to be your singular personal with ran. And ran is interesting because ran is basically walk fast past tense. So however you created rules for your maximal or for your tenses, make sure to use them there because that's very important in determining the difference between ran and walk. Next we have a weird one in that we have to the before store. And English is full of these particulates. But to some extent, to the is simply a prepositional meaning direction, right? Instead of running away from the store, I ran to the store. So whatever you have for a directional, that is what you'll use there. And then, of course, the store itself has to have some form of word. And it can be general, it could mean market, mean specific store, whatever you so please. And I know I didn't put a place for that word in the lexicon section, but following your rules, let's try and make those up. And I'll give us a quick pause and we can get those out of the way, and then you'll be set for rules. Alrighty, so now that we've fiddled with plenty of linguistic principles, it's time to put it all into action. And I'm gonna start. So, firstly, obviously, ran was meant to be the hard part in this sentence. For my language, past and maximal are simply suffixes. So I would use the word walk, and then the suffix for maximal, and then the suffix for past, to thereby turn walk into ran in translation. And here's what the whole sentence sounds like. It looks like a bunch of geometric shapes in a line, but that's also on purpose. So, I ran to the store. Et totabot bata babab. And the click at the end was something in my lexicon that I didn't discuss. I added in verbal punctuation, in that the sound is specifically meant to denote the finishing of a sentence. Though there's nothing to denote individual words besides spaces, context, and obviously fluency. English doesn't have much to denote singular words except, the fact that we know what the words are. I decided that with how samey the language was, there needed to be a defined sentence finisher, even verbally, to keep things on track. So, I ran to the store is et totabot bata babab. That's it. Full sentence, done and dusted. Lee, take it away. Tell us your sentence.
So, when I decided to make ran, I decided to, because you gave a towards and a maximal. So I kind of took the suffix for towards. So I did maximal walk towards to denote running, and then the rest of them I just kind of went. So it turns into something like this: sha'ara, v'asha, ibasha.
All right. I will ask. I don't know the exact sounds for your language, but are those hard stops after the sound?
Yes.
Are you going like consonant to consonant after there, or is that just part of the sound structure?
So the hard stop after the first was because I am not fluent, which I made up.
Fair.
The ones after that was me trying to wrap my mouth around sounds that normally don't get together in English.
And that's an interesting thing, especially when you're trying to make languages and stuff. There are many sounds that the human mouth can make and slam together, and a lot of them are not in English, especially consonant to consonant sounds and vowel to vowel sounds. Want to give it to us one more time? I want to hear it.
Ooh, it's going to sound completely different now. Are you ready?
Always.
So it's sha'ara, va'asha, ibasha. There we go.
Good
I
work.
hope we were able to realize my gibbering tongue twister reset in the middle of that.
Hey, English is full of shit words like and which we stick in anywhere in a sentence. Your language just happens to have tongue flapping.
Delightful.
All right. Alex, how'd your sentence turn out?
Do you want me to explain how I did run as well? Is that what we're all doing?
Sure. Not necessarily part of the plan, but I'm more than down for an internal explanation.
Okay, I took the most least ones and made them like prefixes, and then the past, future are suffixes.
Nice.
So my sentence is Zer avayalud eshimulad.
So, and again, this is probably just due to my non-fluence in your language. Did you take the directional preposition and add it to store there? Because they sounded like the same word, but that may just be a mistake on my hearing.
No, they're separate words. I just said them really fast together.
Hey, and that's perfectly fair. Fluent speakers of a language can rattle off as fast as they possibly can, and a fluent listener can hear it, right?
Yep.
Your language flows very well. I can tell you've had some practice in like sound decision with it. Give it to us again.
Zer avayalud eshimulad.
I can also definitely hear like you said you were maybe taking a little bit of Japanese influence in there.
Probably, because that's one of the languages I'm most familiar with. So.
No, sounds good. And both languages very workable. They seem to have a lot more, sound depth than mine, considering. But there you have it, everybody. That's how you make a language. You don't need too many crazy big pages of notes or dictionaries. You just need some key rules. What did everyone think so far?
I had fun.
Yeah.
And I have to say, yours sounds very musical.
Mine?
Yes, sorry. I realized I should have actually indicated who I was talking about, but yours sounds wonderfully musical.
Thank you.
Ah, good. We're forgetting rules of English. We need to indicate who we're talking to. Who does that?
Well, I actually physically pointed, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm not there."
yeah, that's how you make a language, everybody. For those listening, I'll be making sure the link is made public for this full set of documents, including my examples. And I think Lee and Alex have both said they're willing to scan or otherwise share their example so you can get a look at languages made using this process. Some interesting mentions and something we didn't necessarily cover in this is ASL, American Sign Language, which obviously is a non-verbal language, but still completely counts. If you remember the rules I said at the beginning, you can use sign language to talk about itself. The symbols are arbitrary to the meanings behind them, but a little less so than most modern languages. Most of them have some representation. Yeah, that's where sign language is interesting, eh?
Yeah.
The symbols aren't entirely random, which is why some people have tried to say that ASL is not in fact a language, and they're usually wrong. But it's just a very interesting, study in how we classify what a language is and isn't. Because it's definitely a full language, right?
Oh, 100%.
And you saying you just pointed did remind me of something that perfectly works in terms of language. A language doesn't have to be entirely oral either. You can include hand signals and body language as a regular formative part of oral words to create the full meaning behind such things. I can't think of a real world example for this, only a fictional one. And it's come from a book that I have recommended in the past. It's the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. In the second book, he doesn't create the full language, but discusses the principles of a language that uses hand signals to convey emotion and thereby change the meaning of words that are being spoken. So yeah, it's really your playground when you make this stuff up. I do hope everyone enjoyed, even our lurkers in the background. I see you all there. You can't hide from me. Parting comments, Alex and Lee.
I think this is really fun, and it's a good first step, I think, into thinking about this kind of stuff.
You think you'll lose it again?
Probably.
That means the world to me. Ugh. Lee, go.
I had lots of fun. And I don't generally language build when I world build, but it was a really fun way to get into it.
Glad to hear. Well then, with all that being said, we'll close out for the night. Thanks everybody for listening in. We are the InkGuild on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, though our main home is on YouTube and Spotify. You can also connect with each of us individually through our own social media, and check out our Wix if you want to learn more about us and keep an eye out for more podcasts and other projects. Thanks again for listening, everybody. And remember, Dean's dead, so you're stuck with us. Have a good night.